Shalom. I'd like to give all praises to Yahweh, Basham Yahushai, and double honors to the apostles and elders of GMS that taught us this word. Today's Thanksgiving Day. I just wanted to do a little lesson on the origins of Thanksgiving and how it isn't exactly what they taught us in the schools. It really is about the commemoration of death and destruction of the natives. This is an article from Minnetonka.org, written by Susan Bates. It's entitled "The Real Story of Thanksgiving." Minnetonka American Indian Council. Most of us associate the holiday with happy pilgrims and Indians sitting down to a big feast, and that did happen once. The story began in 1614 when a band of English explorers sailed home to England with a ship full of Patuxent Indians bound for slavery. They left behind smallpox, which virtually wiped out those who had escaped. By the time the pilgrims arrived in Massachusetts Bay, they found only one living Patuxent Indian, a man named Squanto, who had survived slavery in England and knew their language. He taught them to grow corn and to fish, and negotiated a peace treaty between pilgrims and the Wampanoag Nation. At the end of their first year, the pilgrims held a great feast honoring Squanto and the Wampanoags. But as word spread in England about the paradise to be found in the New World, religious zealots called Puritans began arriving by the boatload, finding no fences around the land. They considered it to be in the public domain. Joined by other British settlers, they seized land, capturing strong young natives for slaves and killing the rest. But the Pequot Nation had not agreed to the peace treaty Squanto had negotiated, and they fought back. The Pequot War was one of the bloodiest Indian wars ever fought. In 1637, near present-day Groton, Connecticut, over 700 men, women, and children of the Pequot tribe had gathered for their annual Green Corn Festival, which is our Thanksgiving celebration. In the pre-dawn hours, the sleeping Indians were surrounded by English and Dutch mercenaries who ordered them to come outside. Those who came out were shot or clubbed to death, while the terrified women and children who were huddled inside the longhouse were burned alive. The next day, the governor of the Massachusetts Bay Colony declared a day of Thanksgiving because 700 armed men and women had been murdered. So yeah, that's that Thanksgiving, man. Cheered by their victory, the brave colonists and their Indian allies attacked village after village. Women and children over 14 were sold into slavery, while the rest were murdered. Boats loaded with many as 500 slaves regularly left the ports of New England. Bounties were paid for Indian scalps to encourage as many deaths as possible. So, all the tribes went into slavery, man. It wasn't just, the Negroes, Following an especially successful raid against the Pequot in what is now Stamford, Connecticut, the churches announced a second day of Thanksgiving to celebrate victory over the heathen savages. During the feasting, the hacked off heads of the natives were kicked to the streets like soccer balls. Even the friendly Wampanoag did not escape the madness. Their chief was beheaded, and his head was impaled on a pole in Plymouth, Massachusetts, where it remained on display for 24 years. So these were the people that made the treaty with them. So that's hatred. To behead someone and put it on a pole for over 2 decades, that's hatred. Even with the people that you sat down with, you had a feast with, honoring some type of treaty, which it wasn't, because they went back on it. They slaughtered them. Reading on, the killings became more and more frenzied, with days of Thanksgiving feasts being held after each successful massacre. George Washington finally suggested that only one day of Thanksgiving per year be set aside instead of celebrating each and every massacre. Later, Abraham Lincoln decreed Thanksgiving Day to be a legal national holiday during the Civil War. On the same day, he ordered troops to march against the starving Sioux in Minnesota. This story doesn't have quite the same fuzzy feelings associated with it as the other, where the Indians and Pilgrims were all sitting down together at a big feast. But we need to learn our true history so it won't ever be repeated. Next Thanksgiving, when you gather with your loved ones to thank God for all your blessings, think about the people who only wanted to live their lives and raise their families. They also took time out to say thank you to the Creator for all their blessings. So yeah, it wasn't really just one. They had multiple Thanksgivings. As it says right here, they would hold a Thanksgiving feast for each massacre. After each, with days of Thanksgiving feasts being held after each successful massacre. So they would sit down and feast after they killed a bunch of people, man. Until, George Washington said, no, let us only have one Thanksgiving. So yeah, it's just a little bit of information on the origin. I came across this other article just to back up what this lady wrote, to back up her article, from Rivoli.com. The Patuxet tribe. The Patuxet were a Native American band of Wampanoag tribal confederation. They lived primarily in and around modern-day Plymouth, Massachusetts. The Patuxet have been extinct since 1622. 1620, 1619, 1620, that's when Judah, Benjamin, and Levi started coming over here. We started our slavery. The Patuxet were wiped out by a series of plagues that decimated the indigenous people of southeastern New England in the second decade of the 17th century. The epidemics which swept across New England and the Canadian Maritimes between 1614 and 1620 were especially devastating to the Wampanoag and neighboring Massachusetts, with mortality reaching 100% in many mainland villages. When the Pilgrims landed in 1620, all the Patuxet except Squanto had died. We read about Squanto in the other article. The plagues have been attributed variously to smallpox, leptospirosis, or speriosis, and other diseases. They don't really go in depth. But that's Thanksgiving right here. That's the origins of Thanksgiving. The last Patuxet. Some European expedition captains were known to increase profits by capturing natives to sell as slaves. Such was the case when Thomas Hunt kidnapped several Wampanoag in 1614 in order to sell them later in Spain. One of his captives, a Patuxet named Tisquantum, jealousized as Squanto, was purchased by Spanish friars. They freed him and instructed him in the Christian faith. After he gained his freedom, Squanto was able to work his way to England, where he lived for several years, working as a shipbuilder. He signed as an interpreter for a British expedition to Newfoundland. From there, Squanto went back to his home only to discover that, in his absence, epidemics had killed everyone in his village. Squanto succumbed to Indian fever in November 1622. With his death, the Patuxent people passed into history. So yeah, when you celebrate Thanksgiving every year, you celebrate the extinction of the Patuxent people. The whole tribe is just wiped out. They don't exist anymore. They're completely wiped out. And that's what Thanksgiving is all about. But at the end of the day, all that was prophecy. It was prophesied that would happen to Gadites. That's who the North American Indians are. They're tribal. They're biblical tribes. The true nationality is the tribe of Gad. So one of the scriptures read Genesis 49:19. Gad, a troop shall overcome him, but he shall overcome at the last. Yeah, that troop, the American cavalry. Because really this was just, one part of the Gadite history, all throughout that time, the American cavalry, the Gatling gun, that's the troop that overcame Gad. Almost wiped out the entire tribe. But, in the end, Gad will overcome. He's going to get that warrior spirit back. And he's going to, take part in that revenge. Much like all the other tribes, And we're at that time now. Next scripture is Amos 5:21. I despise your feast days. I will not smell in your solemn assemblies. So now we have a better understanding of what the Lord was talking about. He hates these feast days because all of these holidays that we celebrate here in America, they all go back to some type of bloodshed, towards the Israelites, or it goes back to some type of, idol worship. That's why the Most High hates and despises all these feast days. That's why you gotta have that wisdom and to really understand what it is that you're celebrating. So you're really not supposed to take part in this Thanksgiving celebration, but if you want to get you a little plate, you got family members coming over, you're gonna go visit family, whatever, yeah, get your plate, get you a plate and eat, whatever. But you have the day off, take the day off, enjoy it. He's all slaving you at work, he wants to give you a day off, take it, watch some football or whatever. But don't be all into that holiday spirit. You have to know the truth of what this all goes back to, which is the massacring of the Native Americans, man. And with that, shalom.